Hi, I'm Lisa Dahl, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. Welcome to Getting Healthy Without Rules. This show is about understanding the things that impact your wellness and finding ways to improve it. In this show, we take a non-diet, no-rules approach to health and wellness. Health and wellness is a moving target. We all have different needs and opportunities to improve it. This approach allows you to make the best choice with the information you have right now. It helps you to be present, flexible, and resilient. In addition, I support you in moving from judgment to curiosity and offering yourself self-compassion. It's time we are all a little kinder to ourselves. Today, we peel back the layers of diet culture and weight stigma, the insidious forces that profoundly impact our physical, mental, and emotional health. We often miss that this form of oppression hurts those with larger bodies and can also be a catalyst for developing eating disorders, which can affect people of all sizes. The consequences of stigma run deep, increasing anxiety, depression, and self-loathing. Poor physical health also results as judgment from healthcare providers discourages routine care. The prescription of getting on a diet and pretending we can create a society of thin bodies is not the answer to improving our health. We have been taught to view thinness as the cure for poor health, disregarding data that shows diets are, for the most individuals, unsustainable and fail long term. Rather, we need more awareness of the correlations between body size and various causes such as stress, poverty, trauma, and natural body type. Join us as we explore embracing size diversity, understanding how weight stigma creates harm, and finding healthcare providers that nurture all bodies. Empowerment begins when we make space to understand. As I have shared in previous episodes, we will use the words fat or larger-bodied. For example, you can be in a fat body and accept your body. We use these words as simple descriptors without judgment. Fat is simply another adjective, like thin, and it's up to us to remove the stigma and the negative connotation that society and diet culture have created. For those who are in a larger body and struggling with body acceptance, we hear you and see you, no matter your size. Today, we will explore what is weight stigma and diet culture, how recommendations for weight loss can harm health, supporting clients navigating weight in healthcare, and embracing a weight-inclusive, non-diet approach to healthcare. Be sure to stay until the end for this week's healthy practices. I'm excited to introduce today's expert guests, Cara and Marissa Puputti. Cara uses she/her pronouns and is a registered dietitian specializing in eating disorder care. She has been in the dietetic field for 5 years and recently started her private practice. She practices from a health at every size framework and is passionate about providing LGBTQIA+ and neurodiverse affirming care. Marissa is a non-diet, healthy at every size registered dietitian specializing in supporting folks recovering from eating disorders and disordered eating. Marissa has been an advocate of demolishing weight stigma and diet culture influences throughout her career and has previously served as a co-chairperson of the Weight Inclusivity Task Force within an eating disorder treatment program. Marissa has formerly provided care within 24-hour level of care and ambulatory eating disorder programs and currently supports clients on an outpatient basis at the private practice she co-owns, NutriTeam. Cara and Marissa, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you both here, and I love the fact that you are friends and connect on every level of what you do and how you guys work together.
Yeah, it's really a privilege to be here, and we just really appreciate it, and we're excited to be here, both talking on this super important topic, so we're really grateful.
It is, and as the show says, without rules, there's no rules where this conversation is going to go because it's so important and it's something that's just not talked about enough.
Absolutely.
So let's begin with the simple and powerful question. What is weight stigma?
Yeah, and that's such a big question. I feel like even in the short sort of description that I'll give, it probably won't encapsulate all of the sort of important and unfortunate parts of what weight stigma is, but it's really this, consistent system of oppression that oppresses folks who are in our culture in larger bodies. It makes it hard for them to access non-discriminatory medical care. It makes it challenging for them to find spaces or clothes that fit them well, and really just being able to access things that are kind of basic human rights. And so it's really, of course, a big problem from a healthcare perspective, from just being in society, but it just really makes it hard for folks who are living in larger bodies and fat bodies to live to the best of their abilities.
And also to have like the same access of care, whether
Yes.
it be like mental health, physical health, social health.
Yeah.
It's so nuanced, and there are so many different things that you touched on, and each have different components that it affects. That from the simplicity of getting up in the morning, of what somebody's day is like, trying to navigate where they're going, are they going to be accepted? What armor do they need to put on to protect themselves?
Yeah, it's so frustrating because I think, at the end of the day, and I think we'll touch upon this further in our conversation, that, there's such a thought in our society that to be fat is something that is wrong and something that needs to be fixed. But in reality, it's actually society that needs to change. It's not, these folks in fat bodies that need to do something to try to armor themselves like throughout their life. It's like, that shouldn't have to be a thing. We really need to do better as a society.
And so many people don't even know that they hold that judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really powerful. There's actually, some different tools out there called like the Harvard Implicit Association test that you can check out online. That's a really quick way to just tune into like, that very unfortunate reality that a lot of us, I would say the majority, like hold those sort of internalized implicit biases towards folks in larger bodies. It's definitely, again, something that is sort of, we're all steeped in this culture that promotes being in a smaller size body, so it's not surprising that we all have to do kind of this dismantling work like consistently.
And it is consistent. All my friends, all my family know what I do. And I still get the comments.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And it just, nobody even recognizes or registers, because it's not done with, in these experiences, it's not done with malice or poor intention. And it still lands as harmful and hurtful.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
It's, how do we get on that crusade and just educate? It's just never enough.
Yeah.
So the sister of weight stigma is diet culture.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, so to just give kind of the lay of the land of what diet culture is, really, it's this system of beliefs that like worships thinness and, says that anyone who is, that thinness is really the way to achieve moral value and health, and I'm using the strongest air quotes there because we know that that isn't to be true. It also really says that the way to achieve higher moral statuses and higher health is to lose weight, which we'll talk about and unpack how that actually really isn't true or founded in fact or reality. It also really elevates certain types of eating and certain types of food and demonizes others in a very sort of unfortunate, like very black and white, like this is right, this is wrong approach, and doesn't take into account, cultural differences in eating or so many different things. Ultimately, it's just something that we're all unfortunately steeped in. Like you'll hear, oh, we're all steeped in diet culture, meaning there are all these messages out there of these sort of harmful beliefs around food, around bodies that really sort of promote a unhealthy, actually unbeneficial relationship with food.
It's so hard to escape it. So I'm curious, how did you get into your, how did you come along to this philosophy and this belief of the harm that the diet culture and weight stigma have?
Yeah. Speaking for myself, so I, developed an eating disorder as an adolescent, had sort of, in the way that unfortunately a lot of folks go through, no sort of awareness brought to it from doctors, not even my totally loving parents who, are so supportive and everything. But, it was, hey, there's a somewhat chubby kid that is exercising a lot, so isn't that a good thing? Exactly. And that kind of circles back to how, diet culture really perpetuates disordered eating. And, as I go into my career as a dietitian, I worked in an eating disorder field, and I just saw that, unfortunately, even in some eating disorder treatment spaces, there was still this weight stigma, or this, if we have clients in fat bodies, we want them to manage the eating disorder now, but we want them to lose weight later. We still want them to lose weight. And that, I just came up against all the time, and I'm like, this is just not helpful. This is just going to keep this eating disorder present. This is going to keep people sick ultimately. And through, the guidance of a really great coworker, was kind of introduced to some of these, health at every size, non-diet practices, and here we are. It's just something that I'm so grateful and privileged to be able to, share with others, and just, spread this message, because the standard message of weight loss being the ideal is just not the best.
Cringe.
It's cringe. That's
So tell me how you, So tell me how you came into this work as well.
Oh my goodness, that's a long story, but I love how short you made that.
I know.
I think we all have a story.
Yeah, of course. I mean, similarly to Marissa, my body as a kid was not acceptable. And so with seeing dietitians in a traditional sense as a kid, and also having a sense of low self-worth, I also developed an eating disorder, and my career started in nutrition as actual, hate to say it, but wanting to support people being in smaller bodies. And that was obviously through a disordered lens of health and bodies. And then went to school, grad school, was feeling a lot more comfortable with my own recovery and my own healing, and really wanted to support people with their own disordered eating and their eating disorders. Goodness, worked at the same eating disorder clinic as Marissa, and worked in a couple of group practices along the way. Actually, in the beginning of grad school is when I heard about intuitive eating. End of grad school is when I heard about health at every size approach to health. And then along the way, in different group practices, did I hear more about fat positivity, which is a term that we use that is more inclusive than weight inclusivity. We're talking about being actually pro body, pro fat body, which means we're celebrating fat bodies.
So not hiding fat bodies.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's so interesting when, my story is similar and different, because we all have similar stories and very different and personal connections to it. And when I moved into the health and wellness field, I thought I was going to be, quote unquote, the best weight loss coach out there. I could restrict, I could deprive, I could stay on the diet cycle longer than most people, and took great pride in that, with a lot of judgment of why other people couldn't. And when I started to work with my clients, and they would be making such progress with their changes in their actions and their behaviors and feeling great, until we got to the weight. And then all of that positivity would just go right down the drain in about 2 seconds. And I started to look at my own experience and my relationship with my body and the scale. And I was really surprised that all of the things that I took such great pride in were severe patterns of disordered eating. And the number on the scale at some point scared me to death. And fortunately, I was able to heal myself through learning about health at every size and the practice of intuitive eating. And it changed my life personally and professionally. If somebody had ever told me 7 years ago that I would be against dieting, I would have said never, not me. So we can all learn how to shift our thoughts and create acceptance, because I was the bandwagon of dieting and judgment.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting how everybody shifts or can shift if they choose to with practice.
Yeah, and also being able to hear the voices of those who we actually need to hear more in our field, like in the eating disorder field, and also like in the field of nutrition too.
It is, I really believe what keeps me on this side of it is surrounding myself all the time with it. Because I think if you go back and start, playing in the other playground, it's easy to get lost very quickly again.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost, and I think that there's also that space for that compassion, that can come out, where it's like, if you're having a tough moment, whether you're having like a rough body image day or, that kind of like lure of the dieting creeps back in, we can kind of use that as a saying, okay, well, something's coming up that's making me feel this way. I can give myself so much compassion that my brain is doing its absolute best to keep me safe.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, my brain for many, many years found safety in a lot of those disordered behaviors. And yes, it's an active process to push against it, but it's one that we can even just hold that compassion for ourselves.
And it makes a difference when you learn those skills, because even as coaches and registered dietitians, we're not any different. We all struggle.
Yeah, I mean, our
sure.
schooling was in complete traditional weight management.
Yes,
I remember,
weight-centric to the T.
Yeah, every recommendation, for any kind of disease state would be eat fruits and vegetables and lose weight. That's
it.
what was drilled
How to bring down all that schooling to 3 simple words.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. What are some common myths and misconceptions about weight that contribute to the weight stigma?
Yeah. So I think that, ultimately, as I was hitting on before, that healthcare just perpetuates this message, and of that the way to be healthy is to be in a smaller body, and once you achieve that, then you're all set to go. If we actually look back in 2013, the American Medical Association actually sort of said, hey, and I'm using this word just in terms of what the association did, but not for my own, practice. But they said, is obesity, strong air quotes, a disease state? Is this something that we could essentially bill insurances for? Is this something we can make money for? And they said, we're going to put together a scientific task force. We're going to ask them to go out and research and find out, is obesity a disease? And the scientific task force came back and said, nope, body shape and size is actually not a pathology, is not a disease. And the American Medical Association went against their own scientific team's advice and said, we're instead going to, code and medically bill for obesity. So I think right there off the bat, we see that there are definitely flaws in sort of how our system handles and acknowledges people in fat bodies. So right there. And this, even though this happened in 2013, we know that weight stigma goes back much, much farther than that and is rooted in racism and just not great stuff. And, I think one of the things that I really love to sort of call to mind when I'm remembering that how harmful, our medical system's beliefs are is, when we think of, and again, I'm using this to kind of poke holes in its own system. When we think of how our medical system uses the BMI categories, right? We know those boxes and those categories that are so harmful, and we hate them. Never use it for individual health or well-being, totally. So when we think of those, it's often like the perception that, oh, individuals in those larger body categories must have higher risk of mortality, right? That's what the world is telling us. That's all the messages. That's why all of a sudden the color is red when you're going up on those charts. In reality, the individuals with the highest risk of mortality are actually those in the underweight category. And individuals with the lowest risk of mortality are those actually in the overweight category. So that actually means they even have a lower risk of death than those with normal weight. Again, strongest air quotes amongst all of this.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yes.
Or nobody wants to believe it.
Yes.
Because it goes against everything that we have been told to be true.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, learning about BMI in like middle school or high school, like it goes back that far. And I think if anyone is actually in the audience interested in learning more about the history of BMI, and Marissa actually mentioned The Roots of Racism, Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body, is a lengthy book, but it's pretty amazing. You could also just find like any article online that talks about BMI and its racist roots too.
Yeah.
I just remember how tied I was to BMI for so long, and it was never low enough. And it was a constant fight in my head. What I was trying to achieve, I don't know anymore. And you see it all the time when people are talking about their weight, their body, that it is the gold, quote unquote, gold standard of health, which it's, false gold, or what's the right word when it's really not gold. It's just, it's so harmful.
It really is, from so many different angles.
How does healthcare contribute to perpetuating the weight stigma and diet culture?
So, I mean, it comes down to that, if a person in a fat body goes into their doctor's office, say if they have a sore throat, all of a sudden their doctor is telling them to lose weight, and that's their recommendation. And they might be denied, antibiotics that they need, or whatever sort of treatment they actually need for the ailment they're coming in with. So ultimately, where our healthcare system is just has this knee-jerk reaction to automatically prescribe weight loss, no matter what the cost, it's harmful. And we also know that weight loss interventions do not work. This isn't new information. This goes back to the 1950s or so, where ultimately, sustaining behavioral weight loss interventions is near impossible, for individuals. And diets are known to be at least, if not even more, 80% ineffective. I would even argue 90% or above, And, ultimately, to be recommending something that does not work, is harmful, that's not going to leave anyone in a place of well-being.
One of the biggest things that I hear when I'm talking with my clients and we're talking about challenges of weight and, I need to lose weight because my knees hurt. How do you answer that question? If I lose weight, it's got to be better. And we think that people in smaller, thin bodies don't have knee pain, which we know not to be true.
Yeah.
But how do you answer that? How do you answer that question when you have a client that shares that?
I think that it's such a bigger discussion, and I'm sure that Cara's going to attest to as well.
Please add your comments.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it ultimately is, first saying, I'm so sorry that, our society has taught you to believe that this is something that is needed, that you need to do, that is your responsibility, which, as a kind of a sidebar to this, and I'm speaking for Cara a little bit too here, but we're never anti or against the individual who wants to lose weight. We're against the system that has created this message that this is what you need to do, you know, healthcare systems and everything. So if someone comes in to me and is saying, I want to lose weight, I'm never like, oh no, you shouldn't want that.
Yeah, here's all of the research that we can provide you.
Right.
and
We
send
have,
on
you
your
know,
way.
you want to validate
Yeah.
somebody's feelings and their thoughts.
Yes.
And their
Without a question.
experience.
Yeah, it's what they have learned to be true.
Yeah.
Because they have been told, if you do this, you are going to feel better. Except that they don't understand its actions and behaviors that they can do that may or may not result in that goal of weight loss that makes the difference.
Yeah, and I think, you know, ultimately, you know, I would then kind of like ask the person for consent, like, would you be open to hearing some, you know, alternative, you know, methods that we might be able to explore other than weight loss, you know, whether it's someone who's, you know, having some type of pain, can we find, you know, a health at every size physical therapist that would be willing to work with you, or, you know, chiropractor, again, if it's more back related. I think that there's always this pigeonholing of, oh, you know,
Go on the diet.
You know, do the diet.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd like to think that in my work with folks, I try to zoom out a little bit and say, like, okay, let's find, you know, a path to healing that is not, you know, entrenched in this diet culture and ultimately just going to be sort of a unhelpful approach, because we know that diets don't work. And you know, it's kind of like if someone were to be building a house, right? You know, if you build a house with faulty materials, like, sure, the house can be there and it'll be standing for a little while, but it's going to fall down 5 years later. And that's just like with weight loss.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
what's the foundation?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so for those people who go through weight loss, because people might be watching this and saying, oh, well, I've lost weight. I've done that before. It's not like it's impossible. But I think the bigger question is it sustainable?
Right. I've done it before. I'm doing it again.
Right.
How many times do we have to keep going
Right.
back?
Yeah.
Right.
I think another important thing about that is it's so easy to attribute health outcomes to the weight, even though it's based off of the behavior. Like, let's say someone is to engage in more physical movement that makes sense for them, for their self, and they also notice my knee pain goes away. It's so easily, oh, that's because there's some
Right.
weight that
Cause
went
and
along with
effect.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so helpful when you kind of zoom out and say, okay, well, what have you changed? What's different? What's your daily routine like, so that they start to see that the intention of other actions and their behaviors are what makes the difference. How can recommendations for weight loss harm an individual's health?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it, and it, you know, ultimately we know that weight loss interventions lead to what we call weight cycling, you know, very often. You know, and I do have a graphic that we can kind of point to that really shows what weight cycling is. So when we think about weight loss, it often comes down to like these behavioral weight loss interventions. So what I mean by that is like when someone, you know, starts eating more fruits and vegetables and exercising, sort of the run-of-the-mill, you know, strong air quotes, healthy lifestyle. There tends to be like a V shape or a check mark in terms of what actually happens with their weight. So someone very quickly may lose weight, but then over time, you know, oftentimes a not very extended period of time, their weight ends up back where it was or even higher. And I don't say that as a means to say, oh, that's bad if they're in a higher weight than before, but just to say that the outcomes aren't actually what folks are coming into a weight loss intervention expecting is not what's actually happening. And that's not fair to people, right? You know, we want people to be informed of what is.
Nobody tells you the side effects
Right.
that go along with dieting, because
Yeah.
it comes across as so innocent of, you know, just do these things.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't do any of these
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
And then you do them, you can't take it anymore.
Yep.
And then that slippery slope, and it goes so fast. Everybody feels, you know, well, I'm so out of control, I'm not on my diet. And something that I share with my clients is that it's not the diet that keeps you out of control, it's it is the diet that keeps you out of control, not being off of your diet, because you don't have the confidence or the skills or the tools to be able to trust your body to do the things that it does know how to do or to learn to go back to do.
Right. I mean, our bodies biologically go against dieting. You know, they see it as a famine and, you know, are going to try to protect you in any way. You know, and most weight loss interventions, research shows that folks maybe in that sort of beginning time lose about like 3% of their body weight, which is a really like negligible amount. It's really not something that's
we're not
perceptible.
talking we're not talking a lot.
Right. When people sort of pursue weight loss interventions, they're often assuming that they'll lose like 30% of their body weight. And so it's just that, you know, the information that's out there, you know, it's just not matched with reality of how human bodies work really. And even in that graphic, you know, that I was referencing, I will note that there is one, you know, line that seems to almost show, ooh, whatever that study was, maybe these people lost a bunch of weight. But I do have to comment that that study was actually so rigorous, and the like sort of qualifiers of what the diet was were so intense that they had to, that a lot of people couldn't keep up with the diet anymore. So they had to step out of the research study. So then that actually skewed the results, showing like, oh, wow, a lot of people did great, but a lot of people actually had to leave because it was so awful. So.
And what a lot of studies don't show is the longevity of what happens. You know, you can be, most of us could be quote unquote super successful for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months.
Or even like that 2 to 5 years. We don't know anything. There's no studies that have shown anything beyond that 5 years. And we're even like when we're talking about dieting, I think, and I know that this would be like another show, but like the weight loss medications, like I kind of want to link that into this too, because like we know that that is very much a big trend right now, and we're seeing the same results for that.
Yeah, we just had a guest on a few weeks ago who we really dug deep into what's going on with the Ozempic and the Wegovy, and it was a great show. So I will refer, and any links and things that you're talking about, I will absolutely refer so that people have the resources to go and find them without a question. How does weight stigma internalized by years of exposure to diet culture negatively affect one's self-image and behaviors? Because that's where it starts.
Yeah, that's a big one. You know, I think we're ultimately, you know, we're steeped in this culture of diet culture and weight stigma. And like we talked about earlier, it not only is a catalyst for disordered eating and eating disorders, it also perpetuates and it also praises them. And, you know, so ultimately, you know, say if, you know, a person is, say if they say, all right, I'm going to go through one of these weight loss interventions, and they start to lose weight, right? Like we know in that sort of V-shaped curve, oftentimes they're going to be getting praise from doctors, you know, other healthcare professionals, family, friends, everyone saying, oh, you look great, you look great.
All of it.
And then because we know that weight loss interventions lead to weight cycling, you know, 2 years down the road, they're back where they started or higher, and all of a sudden those comments go away. And it's either silent or even worse, there are comments saying, hey, you know, you got fat or whatever it is. Just and of course that's going to, you know, harm someone's well-being and sort of their perception of themselves. And we know that weight stigma in general leads to higher risks of depression and other, you know, mental health conditions. And it's just, it's not a good thing.
And it brings up something else, you know, for all of us to remember not to comment on somebody else's body, our body. We have no idea what we are praising. Are we praising somebody's disordered eating patterns, eating disorder? Are they stressed? Are they can't? Exactly. And I know that kept me stuck for a really long time. And it's hard to come out the other side when you are now in a very different body than you had been in. And it's, you know, as soon as somebody starts to talk about weight loss, you're like, ooh, like, and you still have to keep yourself in safety. It takes time and work.
Yeah, it almost has become like a social currency. Like when you sort of step out of the bubble and you notice how how commonplace oh, what diet are you on? Oh, how much weight did you lose? It's really insidious and so entrenched in our culture.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to add is, and this is from listening to the folks of people that are my clients and also like fat activists, is that in addition to comments changing or like healthcare providers putting more pressure, there's actually a limited access to living, whether it be like someone living in a larger body, losing weight and being able to access social capital, and then their weight going back up because diets are unsustainable. It's getting in the way of daily life. It's creating eating disorders. Thus, our bodies are going back into this space of what's going to be most safe for my body. And because weight cycling can increase the level of lowering metabolism, that kind of takes into account
nobody talks about that when they are talking about diets.
No.
I can't imagine the small percentage of people that truly understand or know that when they start to go on the diet that they are negatively impacting their metabolism.
Yeah.
That's not on the side effect of the bottle.
No, and like I think we have really strong privilege talking about it because we've been educated. Like we seek out we seek out resources to like have that education and like,
It's like if we knew today if what we knew today was shared with us all those years ago, and how much pain it would have saved us and so many people out there. It would have absolutely changed everybody's life.
Yeah.
Can you give an example, perhaps from your practice, of an individual's experience with weight stigma?
I mean, from my end, I've definitely come across, throughout the lifespan, weight stigma coming into the equation. So where, I've had parents come to me and say, my child has an eating disorder, and sort of the path of that eating disorder started, in a doctor's office where a doctor says to kiddo, hey, your weight is getting higher, we need to eat more fruits and vegetables, we need to exercise, and lo and behold, a few months later, here we are, with an eating disorder. So kind of adolescence, of course, and then even, in adulthood when individuals have been denied access to, pain-reducing surgeries like knee surgery or breast reduction surgery.
Gender-affirming surgery.
Gender-affirming surgery. And additionally, folks who are trying to, pursue fertility treatments. They've been told
that's a big one.
Yep, that you can't. We won't help you until you lose weight. And in my opinion, that's really medical system abuse. That it's telling folks that they are the problem and they need to fix something about themselves in order to access care. When in reality, our medical system needs to do better. Our interventions and our treatments should be able to be accessible by folks across, all different body shapes and sizes.
And if there
matters.
are, and I think another thing is if there are increased risks at a higher body weight, that's really up to the individual to decide if they still want to engage in that procedure versus the doctor gatekeeping if that procedure is allowed for that person.
Personal choice.
Yes.
We only, personal choice has so many other implications, and people want to use it depending on how it affects their, trying to think how to put it politically correct, but it's something that is given and taken away very easily.
Yeah.
Many RDs offer weight loss counseling. How do you respond when a client comes in to you with the objective of losing weight?
Yeah. So it's interesting because there's a couple of Facebook groups that I'm part of, and this is a very common question. And I think a very common thing that a lot of providers are trying to figure out what feels best for them. I think probably 70 or 80% of clients that I work with around their body image and relationship with food also are desiring weight loss. For the most part, they may not be actively doing it. They may be, but But I think my counseling style is very much holding space for where a client is at. And who am I in my body to say, no, don't do that? Of course, we just talked about all of the education, all of the research, not all of it, there's a lot, on like why this doesn't work. But I think there's so many reasons why someone is still engaging in that. Like, we know that people don't just engage in one diet per se. We know they try it like 50 times.
Right.
That is not a statistic. But
Right.
yeah. So like, what do we do is like hold space. Like,
Yeah.
what is it that you're looking for? A lot of the time we come down to like self-worth, having access to a life that's fulfilling. And so like, dietitian hat might be, or like medical nutrition hat might be taken off, and more of like a counseling and like very human interaction is replaced with that. I think there's a lot of grief that comes up with.
Oh, there's so much grief.
Yeah.
And it's not one session's worth of grief.
No.
It's, you know,
this is
people-
like part of the treatment.
Right. And that's important to clarify, is that, you know, when you're working with an RD, when you're working with a therapist, when you're working with a coach, that the journey is not a straight linear line.
Yeah.
That there's times where you're going to start to feel more comfortable and confident, and there's still going to be days where you wake up and you feel at the bottom of the barrel again.
Yeah.
And it's trying to tap into the resources and the skills that they have learned to make sure, you know, to help them not be there so long, I think is part of what we do.
Yeah.
But we're not in the business of fixing, we're helping people heal and understand that we can't make it right overnight.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. It's not a destination, you know. Like you said, I think, you know, living in a body in this world is just inherently hard, and especially if you're, you know, living in a body that has marginalized identities, you know, being, you know, a person of color, or, you know, disabled, or, you know, a queer individual, I mean, a fat individual. So I just think it's something that it's okay to be having a tough time with your body, and it doesn't mean that you need to be the most body positive person all the time. It's just, how can we support you in maybe finding a bit of peace along the way in this journey?
Health is a moving target. And that's just the reality for all of us.
Yeah. I think another big piece of that is sometimes health can become a conversation of morality. And I think as providers, and even just like as individuals, are we moralizing health? And like,
It's a hard question.
yeah.
Because people come to us because they want to be healthy. We have what we believe information to help them be as healthy as they want to be. But it goes back to personal choice.
Yeah.
Where do you want to put your time? Where do you want to put your effort? How do you create balance with all the things that are going on in your life to be the best that you could be at this moment in time, which might look different this time next year?
Yeah.
How does yo-yo dieting impact overall health?
Oh, I love this question so
And
much.
yeah, and I would love to spend a little bit of time there
Yeah.
because it's a term that we use.
Yeah.
And then people will say, well, yeah, I'm a yo-yo dieter. And again, they don't understand the impact of what's actually happening.
Yeah. So a lot of the information that I've gained over the years around weight cycling is from Reagan Chastain. She's a fat activist, and I want to point this out because I find it's really interesting, is like when she was also very within the mind of like, I still need to lose weight. With her research background, she looked into all of the studies of like, what is the best diet to do?
She's a research manifest.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah. So what I've learned from her is that when someone engages in a diet, the first couple ones or the first one, our body is reacting in a starvation mode. Like, not getting enough energy in, okay, there might be some changes to your body. The more that our body goes into that, our brain is really, really smart, and so is our body. And it's like, this sounds really familiar. Okay, I'm going to reserve all of my energy stores to make sure that less harm is created for my body. And so with with going on and off diets, I mean, it makes sense why people are going on diets, coming off of them because they're restrictive, they don't align with people's values, or like life gets in the way, and then going back on the diet because feeling uncomfortable with our bodies, feeling like other people are perceiving our bodies a certain way. I think there's many reasons why people go back on them trying to get health care. And so that constant cycle is actually creating stress in our body. And so if we look at the research that's showing, okay, people in higher weight bodies have more associated metabolic conditions, what we actually know is when we look to see are those folks actually weight cycling, we know that weight cycling actually is a huge association with insulin resistance, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, or high triglycerides, high cholesterol, that sort of thing. So weight cycling / yo-yo dieting is a direct association with like harm to our health, physical health.
Which also bleeds into our mental health
Yes.
and our emotional health.
Yes.
It's all interconnected.
Yep.
Yeah.
And people, what we would love to share is that that you can be healthy at any size when you choose to take actions and behaviors that make you feel good physically, mentally, and emotionally, regardless of the number on the scale.
Yeah, and I think it's so helpful to like hold that mindset of like health is a spectrum, kind of like how you said health is a moving target, where it's not necessarily this really clear healthy, not healthy. Ultimately it's how can we feel as good as we can in these bodies that we're in right now in life, and that looks different for every single person.
Yeah. How does someone find a health at every size dietitian or practitioner? Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in Massachusetts, I would say, especially in the more Boston area, there are more HAES providers.
And HAES stands for Health at Every Size.
Thank you. Yeah, Health at Every Size. Yes. I would say the general recommendation would be going on to ASDA, which is the Association of Size Diversity and Health, and they have a Health at Every Size directory. And people who are on that directory, I recently am part of it, and so you have to write like what is
your philosophy.
Yeah, your philosophy, all of that. Yeah. So I think that's a really great place for people to look for a provider. Mary Lambert is a musician, and she has a list. I think it's for the United States, and she has a list of fat-friendly providers too.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really great now. I mean, one of the tiny silver linings of COVID, is that we have a lot more access with like telemedicine, where, individuals, even if they're based, far across the state, oftentimes can see a lot of these providers who, like Cara mentioned, are more Boston-based. So definitely using those search engines, even different, even if folks don't necessarily have eating disorders, that I think like search engines like through the Multi-Service Eating Disorder Association can be a great start, just to kind of get some, and that's not to say that all of those folks are necessarily Health at Every Size providers, but you do find within the eating disorder space a good chunk of folks who are, so at least it's a tool, it's a resource to see if you can find some.
And some of the keywords are health at every size, intuitive eating, mindful eating.
Fat
you can
Non-diet,
positivity.
fat positive, non-diet, weight inclusive. Goodness, there's so many,
I know,
so many words.
It's a glossary.
And it's also important to, because there's so many words, they have also been hijacked
Yes.
in other ways.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's really important to dig through the information to really understand if this person's supporting what it is that you would like to believe, or have this person on your healthcare team.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point there, with sort of like these words being co-opted, because I think even nowadays in diet culture, folks can, more so than in the past, can say, oh, if there's something that is like very, very obviously a diet, like the grapefruit diet or whatever, like people will be like, oh yeah, no, that's a diet, that's bad. But now, some diets will operate under the guise of wellness,
Right.
and Weight Watchers rebranded themselves,
WW,
all
and
of these
Noom.
things. So it's like people have to be, unfortunately, even more vigilant and kind of that extra layer
Right.
of question.
And one of the things to really notice is that if you're curious if this diet supports, if it's a diet, that's your first cause for a red flag.
Yeah.
And if it's saying that it's not, but third or fourth question in, it asks you, how much weight you want to lose.
Yeah.
That's when the alarm
Yep.
bells go off,
Yep.
because
Yep.
that is the clear sign that does not support the health at every size paradigm that we are talking about,
Yes.
and
Yep.
fat and body
Yeah,
acceptance.
and even, some providers, and again, I obviously welcome everyone to make choices for themselves on what providers they want to see. But I think another, somewhat flag that goes up for me is when I see providers who say, oh, I do eating disorder work, but I also do weight management, or I
they
also
use
do obesity.
Yeah.
They talk about obesity and overweight, sort of those body size pathologizing terms, can just be something to look out for.
What are some of the emotional implications or struggles of living in larger bodies that thinner people may not fully recognize or understand?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this question. So you are welcome to dive in. I think I do want to say one thing is
You
like,
might be saying the same thing.
Okay, all right.
You go first.
well,
Go.
I just want to recognize with that question, I'm building off of the folks who I've learned from, who live in fat bodies, and also my clients. So I just want to name that. What was the question? What are some of the emotional struggles?
What are some of the emotional implications or struggles of living in a larger body that thinner people may not fully recognize?
Yeah, access to life. Like, and I know that's really general, but again, like traveling, like going out to a restaurant, even like going to someone's house, making sure that they have size inclusive furniture. I think there's many things that come into sessions around how people in smaller bodies don't have to think about. Like anything when it comes to like walking into a door and making sure that like there's enough space to even walk in. I think it takes constant vigilance of thinking, am I able to come into this space? And I know that's really general, but like it's really true.
It is true. I mean, when, we're doing kitchen designing, and they have like the triangle of, space. Is that space for everybody?
Yep.
Or is that space for people who are in smaller bodies?
Yeah.
And it's not things that we think about if it doesn't affect us, unless you're living with somebody and you are present for their space.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the thoughts that came to my mind, with this question is, again, I think we always want to be mindful of like, even if we're sort of acknowledging those very real, emotional distresses that individuals in fat bodies have, it's not those individuals in fat bodies that need to be fixed or need to be changed, right? It's more like the society needs to change. So, where if that question were to be taken as sort of a call to action for individuals in smaller bodies, really, recognizing the harms that, society has on individuals in larger bodies and sort of doing the individual work, ourselves to unlearn, harmful beliefs and relearn, more beneficial ones for, everyone.
And our bodies are always changing. You may be in a thin, privileged body today. There is no guarantee that body of yours is going to stay the same. You may be put on medication that might change your body.
Yeah, life just might change, and
Life-
your body goes through changes,
Stress, anxiety, hormones, medications. There's so many different things that your body at this moment in time is never going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, our bodies change from the day we're born till the day we leave this earth. And I talk a lot about that with clients who, maybe have, a good amount of thin privilege. And it's like, if you're, body image, is so tied to being in this one body, that is going to be so fleeting, because that is going to, go out the door in another couple of years. So really building those internal resilience tools are so important, rather than having it tied to what our body looks like as an ornament.
And it is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I think the three of us have been there, where we have been in that super small, thin, privileged body. And then it just slips through our fingers. Yep. And how do we learn to accept that that is not what our value is about, that it is so much deeper, and that weight is the least interesting thing about all of us.
Yeah.
What can we do as providers and individuals to promote understanding and dismantle the harm caused by diet culture and weight stigma? And I think we've touched on it in different ways.
Yeah. I always believe it's understanding the our own social location, and that means basically acknowledging how do we show up in the world. So I think also learning from folks who are doing this work. I think, we've kind of mentioned a couple of researchers. I think we could totally put them in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many resources. What or who are your top, on social, top 3 people that you would say, we can all curate our feed? Who would you suggest to start surrounding yourself with to start to protect that bubble of safety?
Yeah. I would say Reagan Chastain is a great one. Sonia Renee Taylor, another great one. I think we have the book over there too, right off to the side. Virgie Tovar, another great individual.
That's a name I don't know. I'm going to have to go check
Oh,
that
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Virgie Tovar is a fat activist, and she has a great Substack. She has some great books, a work. Yeah.
Okay.
She's great.
She's on my next list.
Yeah.
And any favorites that we've missed?
I mean, this is not so much like social media, but if we're talking podcasts, maintenance phase with Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs, that's an amazing podcast. Honestly, Reagan Chastain is like a really big one that I follow.
I feel like that what's great about, some of these individuals is they're a great sort of like branching point, is you kind of follow them and then they can lead you, even to further resources. Erin Flores, a great...
Lindley Ashland.
Yes, I know it's all kind of coming to us. We could just rattle off names.
So in the
for
show
sure.
notes, we can just put a few because, we have all curated our feeds, and one touch on the diet world and all of a sudden it explodes in that direction.
Yeah.
What would it look like if you start to change your filters and bring in some other people and see people of other sizes? Because the more that you see people of other sizes, the more accepting you are of your own shape and size.
Yeah, and I think we were naming definitely a lot of like fat activists and individuals in the field. I also, not that these are individuals in fat bodies, which is important to distinct, but there are a couple of medical professionals that have really taken to this more fat positive approach, like Dr. Gregory Dodell. I wonder if I mispronounce his last name. Dr. Jennifer Gaudiani, another great resource. And I mean, there's a lot out there, luckily, to kind of hold on to.
It's getting there.
Yeah.
And the more that you surround yourself with this type of support and thinking, the greater level of acceptance and change you start to experience. Before you tell us about this week's practice, are there any other words of wisdom that you would each like to share?
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, just so much self-compassion can go such a long way. We tend to be so hard on ourselves, so mean to ourselves, and that compassion goes a long way.
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
So Cara, tell us what practice you have to share for this week.
I think this one is more of just like a mental, or maybe more of like a journaling prompt, is starting to notice how you react when people talk about bodies and people talk about food, whether it's something that you're saying or doing, or you're seeing online, or you're noticing at the dinner table, just as a way to start getting an idea of like, how is it that you're reacting to that? And I always find like building self-awareness is always the most important thing to decide or start understanding, like, how am I showing up in diet culture? Yeah, so I would say starting to bring a little bit more self-awareness.
Awareness is the key to that first step.
Yeah.
Once you start to give yourself permission to get to know the real you inside.
Yeah.
And I know you have something as well.
Yeah. So, I would say for any individuals who feel like that they are experiencing weight stigma, especially in a healthcare setting, if your doctor or provider is ever saying to you, oh, you need to lose weight to cure X ailment, I think asking, what would you recommend to a thin a person in a smaller body with this ailment? Because like we talked about before, like ailments go across the body spectrum. It is not just individuals in fat bodies who experience knee pain or back pain or all of those things. And I would also add on the tail end of that, if your provider is ever really stigmatizing, providers ultimately work for you, and you're welcome to seek out another professional. And I say that, of course, knowing that that takes, a lot of privilege, and knowing that there are barriers to care with insurance and all of that, but really make sure that you're in a space that is not bringing shame into the treatment plan.
And on that note, it's people don't know that they do not have to get weighed at the doctor's office. And that a simple no thank you is all that it takes. And don't let anybody's, look or uncomfortableness shift what makes you most comfortable.
Yeah, they work for you ultimately at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a note to remember.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Yeah, thank
and
you for having
today
us.
we learned about weight stigma, its impact on health, and how to take steps towards unlearning diet culture. If you'd like to continue this conversation, I invite you to join me for my free office hours and conversations. And you can find the schedule on my website. And I look forward to seeing you and carrying on this conversation next time on Getting Healthy Without Rules.